You know that feeling, right? Trying to make a real difference, maybe in your community or even something spiritual,
Oh, yeah.
and you're just wading through all this information, talks, articles, strategies, like a million ways to reach everyone, make this huge impact.
And it's just a lot. You end up feeling kind of scattered, maybe even like you're not getting anywhere.
Exactly. Scattered, ineffective, like you're shouting into the wind.
And it makes you wonder, doesn't it?
Yeah.
What if the best way, the most powerful way to actually make a difference, especially in, say, spiritual engagement, what if it isn't the biggest plan?
What if it's something smaller, more
Yeah.
focused?
Exactly. Something more personal.
Well, that's pretty much the big idea we're wrestling with today. We're going to dive into this concept that keeps popping up in the sources you shared with me.
Yeah.
Some people really champion it. Others are, well, skeptical. But it feels like it could really reframe how we think about making an impact. It's called the person of peace.
Right. The person of peace. And yeah, we've got a whole stack of sources here looking at it from different angles, where it comes from scripturally, the practical challenges, some common myths.
Critiques, too, right? Because it's not without pushback.
Oh, definitely. We'll get into the critiques. And crucially, what does it actually look like to find, connect with these people today?
Okay, so our mission for this deep dive is basically to sift through all that, pull out the really key insights, understand what this person of peace thing really means.
Yeah, tackle the myths, look at the objections squarely.
And see how it applies to you listening right now. Think of it as maybe a shortcut, a way to get genuinely informed on this idea, which feels pretty powerful.
Because things are shifting, aren't they? The whole landscape of trying to connect with people spiritually or in the community, it's different now.
How so?
Well, think about traditional mass outreach, big campaigns. The sources suggest they're maybe less effective now. There's just so much noise, information overload.
People's attention spans are shorter.
Right, and maybe a growing distrust of big impersonal movements. So the old ways might not be working like they used to.
So maybe success isn't about reaching everyone at once.
Maybe it's more strategic. Maybe it's about finding those key individuals, the hidden gems, as one source called them. People God's already positioned.
Okay, let's unpack that. Person of peace. When the sources use that term, are we talking about like a personality, someone super nice or outgoing?
Yeah, that's a common first thought, but the sources are really, really clear on this. It's absolutely not a personality type.
Okay.
And it's not some formula you just apply. It's framed as a discovery.
A discovery.
Yeah, it's about recognizing someone God has already been preparing. They're like a signpost, an indicator that God's already at work in that specific place or that network, a divinely positioned individual.
Okay, a discovery, not me picking someone based on, I don't know, charisma. That changes things. So if God's already preparing them, what are the signs? How would you recognize one?
Good question. The sources give us some characteristics to look for, but they stress these are indicators, not some rigid checklist.
Gotcha. Signposts, not boxes to tick.
Exactly. Think of them as attributes you see in action. There are about 4 key ones that come up again and again.
Okay, what's the first?
First, they tend to be spiritually receptive. There's an openness there, a curiosity. They lean in, when spiritual things come up.
They're listening.
They're listening, asking questions. They might have what the sources call a seeking heart, or maybe an invisible ache, like a sense that there's something more, even if they wouldn't call it religious. They just seem attuned somehow.
Okay, receptive. That makes sense. What's number 2?
Second, they have relational influence. Now, this one's crucial and often misunderstood.
How so?
It's not necessarily about having a big title or being the most popular person. It's more about their natural networks. People listen to them. They have credibility, trust within their circle, what the sources call relational capital.
So influence through relationships, not position or status.
Precisely. Okay, third is hospitality.
Like inviting you over for dinner.
It could be, but it's broader than that. It's about inviting relationship, making space for you and for the message you might bring. It could be opening their home, sure, but also offering their time, access to their friends, their social circle. It's a welcoming posture.
Welcoming the messenger and the message. That feels important.
It's vital. And then the fourth one, maybe the most telling, is responsiveness.
Responsiveness.
Yeah. They don't just hear what you share and nod politely. They act on it. Something resonates, and they actually do something in response.
Okay, so spiritually receptive, relationally influential, hospitable, and responsive. Those are pretty concrete things to look for. But where did this whole idea come from? Is it like a modern strategy?
Not at all, actually. It's ancient. The concept, even the phrase person of peace, comes right out of the Gospels.
Really? Where?
It's in Luke chapter 10. Remember when Jesus sent out the 72 disciples, 2 by 2?
Vaguely.
Yeah. He gave them specific instructions. He said, when you enter a house, first say peace to this house. If someone who promotes peace is there, your peace will rest on them. If not, it will return to you.
Luke 10. Wow. Straight from Jesus. So, someone who promotes peace. What did that mean in context?
Well, the sources really unpack this. Jesus was giving them a way to discern, to recognize receptivity. He was basically saying, look for where God is already working.
Okay.
That phrase, son of peace, Chios Ironos in the Greek, it signaled a person God had prepared. Someone through whom shalom, peace, wholeness, God's presence, could land and multiply. It wasn't just a travel tip. The sources argue is a cornerstone of his strategy.
A strategic cornerstone, not just a nice idea. Fascinating. Are there other stories in the Bible that kind of show this principle, even if they don't use that exact phrase?
Oh, absolutely. Once you start looking for this pattern, you see it pop up quite a bit.
Like where?
Think about Cornelius in Acts 10. Roman centurion, devout guy, praying, giving alms.
Right. Peter had the vision.
Exactly. God prepared Cornelius with a vision, and he prepared Peter with a vision simultaneously. And Cornelius' entire household becomes the first group of Gentile believers because Peter went to his house.
One person opened the door to a whole group.
Yeah. Or Lydia, Acts 16, businesswoman at Philippi. Scripture says God opened her heart when she heard Paul. Her home becomes the base for the church there, the first one in Europe.
Wow. And the Samaritan woman, John 4, Jesus talks to her, one person.
Right, an outcast, really. And what does she do? She immediately runs back and tells her whole village. They come out to see Jesus because of her. She was absolutely a person of peace.
In Ahab, in Joshua, hiding the spies.
Another great example. Totally unexpected person, right? A prostitute in Jericho. But her home, her action, becomes the entry point for God's plan for the city.
An entry point through someone overlooked.
These stories all point to this theological reality. God often works through one prepared person to reach the many connected to them. The kingdom doesn't always arrive with a huge fanfare. Often it enters quietly through one open life, one open network. It really reflects God's relational way of working.
Okay, so it's biblical, it's historical, it feels deeply strategic. Why the buzz now? Why is this idea so relevant today?
I think the sources argue it speaks right into our current cultural moment. The information saturation we talked about.
Yeah, the noise.
The shrinking attention spans, the declining trust in big institutions, including religious ones sometimes.
Trying to get a message heard feels harder than ever, like shouting into that hurricane.
Exactly. And so relying only on mass methods like big events or broad campaigns, well, the sources point out the challenges. Often low retention, maybe impact that's wide but not deep.
A message that feels disconnected from real life.
Yeah, or disconnected from specific cultural context. For many people, those older tactics just aren't yielding the same results anymore.
So the person of peace idea offers, what, a different path.
It's presented as a more nuanced way, more relational, more sensitive to context. And crucially, it partners with what God might already be doing.
So looking for where God's already at work.
Right. Instead of trying to force a message onto a whole crowd, you're looking to connect with that one person who's open, who has those relationships. The one whose openness can unlock a whole network from the inside out.
So it's not about choosing between strategy and, passion or zeal.
Not really. The sources frame it more like method versus maturity, or maybe efficiency versus true effectiveness.
Interesting distinction.
Finding a person of peace might not be the fastest way to get eyeballs, maybe, but it encourages a more organic, spirit-led kind of mission, where the fruit isn't just a quick decision, but lasting multiplication that grows through trust and relationship, which honestly is how most movements actually spread, right?
Yeah. Through trust, through people influencing their friends, their family. That makes a ton of sense, especially now. But I know it's not universally loved, this idea. You mentioned missiology wars.
Right. It definitely gets pushback. It's called a contested concept.
So what are the main criticisms? Or maybe just misunderstandings?
Well, one common myth is thinking, everyone I meet could be my person of peace, or there must be one right here, right now.
And the reality is?
The reality, based on the Bible and the sources, is that it's something God prepares. It's not automatic. It takes patience, discernment, prayer, you might not find one immediately everywhere you go. It's a specific discovery, not a universal guarantee.
Okay. What else? I can imagine people thinking the person of peace has to be someone important,
Yeah.
influential in a worldly way. The mayor, the CEO.
Yes, that's a huge potential misstep. The sources really warn against that temptation.
Temptation of influence.
Yeah. Confusing worldly status with spiritual openness. Real kingdom influence often looks very different. Your person of peace might be a quiet grandmother, a student, a refugee. Someone totally overlooked by the usual power structures.
So don't just look for the person in charge.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
Okay, another critique. Does focusing on individuals mean you stop, proclaiming the message more broadly? Does it replace evangelism?
Yeah, does it?
The sources argue strongly no, it doesn't replace it. It actually accelerates it. But it makes it smarter, more spirit-led.
How?
It anchors that broader message in real relationships where it can actually take root. Think of it like farming.
Yeah.
Broad proclamation is sowing seed everywhere. Finding a person of peace is like finding that really fertile soil where the seed can grow deep and multiply within that specific patch.
So it's not either, it's integrated.
Exactly.
Integrated. Okay, what about this one? Is it too passive? Like you just sit around waiting for God to point someone out?
Not at all. The sources stress it requires active presence, active listening, prayerful awareness, and real relational investment. It actually demands more intentionality, just a different kind. It might seem slower up front, but it's geared towards a richer, more sustainable harvest.
Is it elitist? Like only super spiritual people can find these folks?
That comes up, but the sources push back hard. They frame it as an invitation for any believer. Remember, Jesus sent the 72 ordinary disciples, not just the 12 core apostles. It's about everyday obedience, attentiveness. It's actually empowering. It's not just for the professionals.
Okay. What about, is it too focused on relationship and not enough on, doctrine, truth?
The relationship versus truth tension. The argument is that relationship is the bridge for truth.
The bridge.
Yeah. You earn the right to speak into someone's life through trust. Relationship opens ears, presence softens hearts, and then patient teaching within that caring context allows truth to land and make sense. It's the container.
Okay, I see. Now, here's a big one I've heard debated. Isn't this whole idea too individualistic? Maybe too Western? Does it even work in more communal cultures?
That's a really important critique to address. The sources suggest that view sometimes misses the core principle, which they argue is transcultural.
How so?
While the outward form might differ, what hospitality looks like, how influence works, the underlying idea of relational receptivity, of God preparing individuals within networks, that's seen as universal. Look at the biblical examples. A Roman soldier, a Samaritan woman, a Greek businesswoman. Pretty diverse.
And Paul adapted his approach, right, between different cities.
Exactly. Philippi versus Athens, very different context, different starting points. The challenge isn't usually the principle itself being inapplicable. It's more our own potential inflexibility in recognizing it when it doesn't look like our own cultural norm. We need to look beyond status and familiar forms.
That makes sense. A lot of these critiques seem to stem from trying to fit it into old boxes.
Okay, speaking of missteps, the sources mentioned a pretty significant blind spot historically when people try to apply this.
Yes, absolutely. A major point is what one source calls the missiological failure of consistently overlooking or sidelining two groups, women and youth.
Why is that?
Historically, there was often this focus, sometimes called power, age, and missional myopia, on finding the established male leader, the elder, the chief, assuming he was the only door.
And overlooking women was a mistake because
women are so often the relational hubs. Think biblically, Lydia, the Samaritan woman, the women who first shared the news of the resurrection.
Right.
And today, women are often the spiritual pulse of the home. They have these vast, often unseen networks of influence, simple gatherings, women sharing life together. That's often where deep spiritual curiosity gets explored. Ignoring that is missing a huge part of where God is often already working.
And youth, same
Right.
issue. Similar myopia, yeah. Often seen as just the future church, not the church now. But look at the Bible. David, Mary, Timothy, even King Josiah leading reforms as a teen.
Good point.
Young people today, they're often fearless, flexible, incredibly networked digitally. They're huge peer influencers. That line about the next Paul, maybe being a teen on TikTok, it's provocative, but it makes you think. Dismissing youth is dismissing massive potential.
It really does force you to redraw your mental map of who a person of peace might be. It's about changing the filter, isn't it?
Exactly. Instead of asking, who's in charge? Maybe ask, who's spiritually hungry here? Who creates space for others? Who do people actually listen to and trust?
Looking in different places too, homes, online groups, not just formal settings.
Yes. And crucially, when you find someone, it's about equipping and empowering them, not just using them as a bridge for your ministry, but trusting them to lead in their context.
Mm.
God loves using the overlooked.
Okay, this is really shifting how I think about it. So let's get practical. How do we move from understanding this to actually doing it? What does this art of attentiveness look like day to day?
Right. It's less a formula, more a way of seeing how to recognize someone. Look for those attributes we talked about, but in action.
Okay, give me examples.
Receptivity. Someone leans in when you mention something about faith, asks genuine questions, doesn't shut down. Hospitality. They invite you for coffee, include you in a group chat, share their time. Influence. You notice others value their opinion or their life just seems to have a quiet credibility.
And responsiveness.
That's the big one. They do something, maybe they check out something you recommend, or they start talking to their friends about the conversation you had, like Cornelius sending for Peter, or Lydia saying, come stay at my house.
So you're watching for pattern of these things. Then what? If you think you see these signs.
Well, first the sources say, pray with eyes open. Ask God, like specifically, show me who you're preparing around me, and then actually look and listen during your day.
Be aware.
Be aware. Second, walk slowly. Resist the pressure to rush relationships or agendas. Discernment takes time. See who God keeps bringing into your path.
That feels countercultural. Slow down.
Totally. But essential. Then you might gently test for receptivity, not in some weird manipulative way, but just initiate natural conversations. Share a little of your own journey or perspective. See how they respond. Remember Luke 10? If the peace rests, stay. If it doesn't seem welcome, it returns to you and you respectfully move on.
Okay. And if they are receptive, if the peace stays.
Then you build genuine relationship. This is huge. Humility, patience, just being present. Don't make it a project.
Not transactional.
Absolutely not. Stay long enough to really know them. Share life, eat together, serve them somehow. Let trust build. Remember Jesus said, don't move around house to house. There's power in staying and investing deeply once you find that openness.
Invest deeply. And the final step.
Empower. Don't extract. This person isn't just a contact or a stepping stone. They're a potential partner God is raising up. Your role changes. It becomes about equipping them to share and lead within their world, in their way. Trust the spirit in them.
Wow. It's really about identifying and then partnering with someone God's already preparing to be a catalyst.
That's the heart of it. And that leads to the bigger picture, really. This isn't just one more strategy to add to your list. It's more like adopting a different spiritual posture.
A different way of being in the world.
Yeah, a way of seeing and moving that tries to align with how God often works, which is countercultural, right?
Yeah.
It values depth over speed, relationship over sheer numbers.
So how do we cultivate that posture, day in, day out?
It comes back to some basics, really. Praying for discernment, constantly asking God to help you see what he's doing. Critically, becoming a good listener, like really listening to understand people's stories, their hopes, their hurts, not just waiting to talk.
Seeking to understand, not just persuade.
Exactly. And building bridges, finding common ground, shared values, instead of focusing only on differences.
And that long game of relationship building.
Absolutely essential. Consistent, genuine presence builds trust, which also requires embracing patience. Transformation takes time, God's time. Resist pushing, and always empower, not impose. Partner with people, trust them, encourage their ownership in their context.
It really changes how you might approach, well, everything. Your neighbors, your colleagues, online interactions, looking for those little signs of God already being there.
Yeah, it shifts the focus. Instead of feeling like you have to start everything from scratch, you start looking for where God's already laid the groundwork and you just join in.
This has been, well, really clarifying, this deep dive. It pushes back on that need for massive immediate results and instead points towards this patient, relational way of discerning, looking for someone God's preparing.
And the sources really argue this isn't a retreat. It's actually a deeper engagement, person by person, heart by heart, network by network. It feels very, well, biblical and practical for today. Resilient.
It feels less like just another tactic and more like learning to follow the Spirit's lead more closely.
Because, as the sources compellingly argue, sometimes the biggest moves of God don't start with a crowd. They start with just one person.
So here's something to think about. In a world that's just constantly demanding your attention, shouting from every direction, Where might God be quietly at work right near you? And what might it look like, maybe just this week, to consciously slow down, quiet your own agenda for a bit, pray with your eyes open, and just look for the someone he might already be preparing?